yeah, it's been eye-opening.
Social media has helped romance bypass traditional publishers by connecting directly to the audience, says Florida-based romance and mystery author Tamara Lush. And yes, that is her real name.
It really is. It's the name I was given at birth.
She quit her job as a reporter for the Associated Press a few years ago and says she makes 75% of her previous salary writing steamy stories about tropical islands and amateur detectives. She recently sold a book to the new publishing arm of TikTok's parent company, ByteDance. And she's working on a new project called Swamp Thing.
It's a funny romantic mystery about an alligator trapper who also solves crimes.
Those cliche heterosexual bodice rippers with glistening muscles and heaving bosoms on their embossed covers still sell well. But now there's more space to represent a broader range of human experience, says Leah Koch. She's co-founder of an all-romance bookstore, The Ripped Bodice, with locations in LA and New York.
When someone from our extremely diverse clientele comes in and says some version of, do you have a book with somebody like me? Whether that is, I use a wheelchair, or I wear a hijab, or I am pansexual, or whatever. Like, almost all the time we have at least one or two options for them.
And she'd like to see those one or two options expand when those customers come back for more.
Megan McCarthy-Carino there reporting on the rise and rather inevitable rise of romance as fiction. Now, Ngar, I mean, terribly sexist of me to ask you, but I mean, would you read romances? Do they appeal to you?
I wish I had time to read romance novels, Roger. Maybe one time a year, around Lunar New Year. But no,
I was going to say, that's when you said you were bored. You sit around reading romances then?
However, saying that, I think book sales in Taiwan actually increased last year. It's increasing every year, which is a good sign. Because the Taiwanese are really keen readers. Unfortunately, they don't really read romance novels very much. They read other kinds of books.
Well, that'll disappoint my editor, who just said in my ear that he wanted to give up his current job and sit down and write African romance novels. So that's an option.
Oh dear.
That's a way forward. Well, you know, it's a good way to do things. Perhaps more exciting sometimes. Ralph, what is on your bedside table right now?
Well, I'm just thinking, what a fantastic way to spend your life, right? People say this is.
That's what my editor's saying. It's a good way. It's a good way forward. We should all write books.
I'm absolutely up for that. Like, I'm absolutely up. That'd just be a wonderful way to spend your life. Because I'm in the same way as everyone else. I can't find the time.
Yeah.
Like to read fiction, I just can't find the time. So I'm definitely doing something very, very wrong.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the problem is it's just not an obvious space. I mean, if I read last thing at night, I tend to fall asleep, so it doesn't really work. And somehow to sit down in the middle of the day and read a book, you know, a novel, it doesn't feel right. And God, you don't do things like that, do you?
Exactly the same with me. Yeah, I pick a book and then fall asleep. So yeah, but I think COVID pandemic actually is very good for book sales and for reading in general. When people have so much time on their hands and start reading. Yeah, maybe we're expecting another pandemic. Are we?
Oh gosh, I think so. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I can think of many reasons to want to read, but I don't think I'd wish a COVID pandemic as the way to make us read. But I mean, Ngar, are you actually reading a book? Do you have a book on the go right now, or not?
I do. I've got a non-fiction book, which is on my table. I'm not going to tell you why.
Oh, go on, tell us. What's it about? Oh, well, that's even more intriguing.
It's all about Southeast Asian politics. It's not something yeah.
Perhaps that's why it sends you to sleep. I don't know when you read it, just a thought.
Yeah.
Ralph, come on. Have you got a book on the go or not?
Oh, I do, yeah. I've been reading all of the stories from Le Carre since its past.
John Le Carre, yes.
15 or so per spy. But I gotta tell you, it's going very, very slow. It's like I only do a few pages a night before, as you said, I fall asleep.
They move slowly, those books, though, which is half the thrill. Well, I have to say right now, I'm in that awful position of not having a book on the go, because I finished one, I think, just before Christmas. And I've got that problem of when it's not right to take a book and open it and sit down in the middle of the day. It doesn't work. But no, if someone could come up with a secret of how you can reconcile yourself to doing that, I think a lot more books would be sold. But no, Ralph, what we've got to do is write books, I think. And Gar, would you be up for writing a book as well?
Maybe not now.
Even on Southeast Asian politics, perhaps?
Generally, I have all the time I don't invest in such luxury.
Well, writing is our life anyway, so therefore we have to go with it. I guess that's the way it works. Anyway, well, I think this moment we should all go off and read a book. Pick up a book and read it, even if it is on Southeast Asian politics. And perhaps that's a good way to spend the weekend. And I hope it gets to become a bit more exciting a weekend for you, Nga. Ralph and I will be busy writing books. Perhaps that's what we'll be doing.
Good luck with your book.
Thank you. We'll reconvene on this one shortly. Anyway, thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it from Business Matters. We're back on Monday. Bye-bye.
This is the BBC World Service, and on the inquiry this week, the race to walk on the moon is back on, but half a century after a human last landed on the lunar surface, the stakes have become even higher. This week, we're asking, who will be next to walk on the moon? The inquiry at bbcworldservice.com/inquiry. Stumped is in 30 minutes. Here's Alison Mitchell.
Mitch Marsh has had an extraordinary couple of years, from being recalled to the Australia Test team, winning the 50-over World Cup and being named T20 captain. We hear how he played in the Ashes whilst also supporting a young lad with his mental health.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
To GMT, Alexei Navalny's supporters mourn the Putin critic's presumed death in a Siberian jail.
First my reaction was like, it's just a joke, but then I was crying for 1 hour.
I was broken. I really thought that it couldn't happen. Never.
President Biden blames Vladimir Putin's brutality. Russia hits back.
He has been moved to the Arctic zone as a punishment, where it was very cold and it can influence his health condition.
I'm Nick Leahy. Also on the newsroom, Donald Trump's ordered to pay more than $350 million in a fraud case.
The only thing that matters are the facts and the numbers. And numbers, my friends, don't lie.
In the Hungarian capital, an anti-government rally over child abuse scandal that has led to the president resigning. And Argentina's new president defends huge spending cuts.
Hello, I'm David Hart. Donald Trump has been ordered to pay more than $350 million in penalties in his civil fraud trial in New York. The judge found him liable for falsely altering his net worth to receive tax and insurance benefits. Mr. Trump has also been banned from serving as a director of any New York corporation for 3 years. Mr. Trump said the ruling was un-American and a total sham. His lawyers say he will appeal. The lawsuit was brought by New York Attorney General Letitia James.
This long-running fraud was intentional, egregious, illegal. And he did all of this with the help of the other defendants, his 2 adult sons, and senior executives at the Trump Organization. So, after 11 weeks of trial, we showed the staggering extent of his fraud and exactly how Donald Trump and the other defendants deceived banks, insurance companies, and other financial institutions for their own personal gain.
President Biden has accused Vladimir Putin of responsibility for the death in prison of Russia's most prominent opposition politician, Alexei Navalny. Other Western leaders have issued similar condemnations and paid tribute to Mr. Navalny's courage for standing up to Mr. Putin at great personal cost. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also blamed the Russian leader for Mr. Navalny's death.
Putin does not care who dies, as long as he retains his position. And that is why he must not keep anything. Putin must lose everything. He must not retain anything. He must be held accountable for what he has done.
The Ukrainian army says it has withdrawn from the key eastern town of Avdiivka, the gateway to the Russian-occupied city of Donetsk, which has been engulfed in fierce fighting for months. Anna Pistana reports.
Ukraine's commander-in-chief Alexander Syrskyi said he had acted to avoid encirclement and preserve the lives of his forces. Ukraine has been trying to defend Avdiivka for months while struggling with ammunition shortages. A much-needed $60 billion package of military aid from the US remains stalled in Congress. Ukraine had recently tried to reinforce its defense by sending an additional brigade to Avdiivka, only to see some of its men killed and captured. The ground forces commander in southeastern Ukraine, Alexander Tarnavsky, acknowledged that withdrawal was the only solution, as the Russians now held a 10-to-1 shell advantage there.
The Japanese Space Agency has launched its new flagship H3 rocket on a 2-hour test flight after years of delays and 2 aborted attempts. Japan's first launch a year ago was abandoned after ignition trouble left the rocket standing motionless on the launch pad. Problems with the second attempt meant the self-destruct mechanism being deployed. The agency hopes the H3 will win orders from global clients. World news from the BBC. Tens of thousands of Hungarians have joined the largest rally against the government for years in Budapest after a paedophile scandal led to the resignation of the president. After the is an Texas has unveiled plans to build a military base near the Mexican border to deter illegal immigration. Greg Abbott said the 80-acre facility will be constructed in the city of Eagle Pass. It will host up to 1,800 troops. The Republican governor told the reporters he had already ordered more of the razor wire that has been preventing crossings in other areas.
We've seen the effectiveness of the razor wire in Shelby Park, where crossings have gone from 3,000, 4,000, or 5,000 people a day to less than 1% of that crossing illegally per day. And that's because of the effectiveness of the razor wire. Our goal is to make sure that we expand the effectiveness of that razor wire to more areas along this border.
Republicans accuse President Biden of failing to fund border security for political reasons. Argentina's biggest trade union federation says it's considering calling a general strike over President Javier Milei's decision not to readjust the minimum wage. Mr. Milei said workers and employers should resolve the issue themselves. He came to power in December, promising to reduce the role of the state in the economy. Union leaders say that rampant inflation has corroded the real value of workers' pay. Prices have been rising at a rate of more than 20% a month. BBC News.
Hello, you're listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service. I'm Nick Qureshi, the time here in London, 2:06 GMT. In several European cities and beyond, mourners, many of them Russians, have come together to share their outrage over the announcement of the death of the jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Prison officials said the 47-year-old opposition leader collapsed suddenly after taking a walk in a Siberian penal colony. Some crowds gathered outside Russian embassies chanting anti-Kremlin slogans, holding up signs calling Vladimir Putin a killer. In St. Petersburg, the supporters chanted Mr. Navalny's name. The authorities in Moscow warned people against staging any public demonstrations. Dozens of residents in the Russian capital came to lay flowers at a monument honouring victims of political repression in the Soviet Union. These people in Moscow gave their reaction.
I was seeing the news on my phone, and first my reaction was like, it's just a joke, it can't real. But then the news was coming more and more and more, and I was crying like for 1 hour.
I was with my friends. I was broken. I really thought that it couldn't happen. Like, never.
Well, Alexei Navalny's death comes less than a month before an election that is bound to give President Putin another 6 years in power. With his assessment, here's our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg. even before today, these were very dark times for the Russian opposition. I mean, where are the main Russian opposition leaders right now? They've either fled into exile or they're in prison in Russia. Alexei Navalny himself, of course, was in prison. Now he's dead. And also keep in mind that ever since the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Russian authorities have passed a whole string of laws, new laws, repressive laws, aimed at silencing dissent, silencing criticism of the authorities of the Kremlin and of the war in Ukraine. But I'll tell you what struck me most today, on what was a very dark day here in Russia, just chatting to some of those people who were laying flowers. I mean, despite their clear sense of shock, some of them said to me that despite everything, they still have hope that things could get better, that Russia does have a better future ultimately. It was as if they were clinging to this hope, like some sort of shaft of light in the dark. Steve Rosenberg. Well, international leaders have blamed Vladimir Putin for Alexei Navalny's presumed death. President Biden has described it as more proof of Putin's brutality. Delegates at the Munich Security Conference in Germany gave Mr. Navalny's wife a standing ovation when she called on the world to unite and punish the Russian regime. The Kremlin has dismissed the international reaction as hysterical. Sergei Markov, a former Russian MP and supporter of President Putin, put the 47-year-old's death down to one of two reasons.
One is natural, but also he has such a natural focus with his heart. Low-level officers of the prison also would share some responsibility because he had been moved to the Arctic zone as a punishment where it was very cold and it can influence his health condition.
Well, that's the Russian take on things. Our correspondent Will Vernon met Alexei Navalny on a few occasions while reporting for the BBC in Russia. And Will joins us now. Good to have you on the programme, Will. I suppose you should ask what Alexei Navalny was like.
Well, Alexei Navalny was a very engaging person. He was an excellent public speaker. When he spoke, you wanted to listen. His speeches would be kind of peppered with catchy phrases and jokes. He maintained his sense of humour, didn't he? Right until when we saw him in that court appearance the day before the announcement of his death, he was still joking even then. And Navalny just spoke the truth. He just told it like it was, and that's what people liked. In a country where people are very used to being lied to, he just told it as it was. He used to sign off his YouTube videos. He had his own YouTube channel where he would post videos of anti-corruption investigations into Vladimir Putin and those around him. And at the end of his videos, he would say this phrase: "Subscribe to our channel. This is where you'll hear the truth." But most of all, he was courageous, and this is a word we've heard a lot today, isn't it, from various world leaders who paid tribute to Alexei Navalny. We've heard the word courage a lot, and he displayed extraordinary courage throughout his life, in fact, and his political career, culminating, of course, with that fateful decision to return to Russia in 2021. This is after he'd been recovering in Germany from the poisoning. He made the decision to come back to Russia in January 2021. My colleagues and I were in the airport when he flew in, and he knew that he would almost certainly be arrested when he landed on Russian soil. Of course he was, but he still made that decision, and that was very brave.
Can we read anything, Will, into the timing of this? As you said, we saw him joking just a couple of days ago in court. We know that elections are coming up in, just under a month?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know the details of what really happened to Alexei Navalny. We may never know. But if this was done intentionally now, then it could be seen, I think, as a message, perhaps, to any potential opponents or critics of President Putin ahead of those highly stage-managed and predetermined presidential elections, that this is what will happen to you if you oppose the Kremlin. But if this was some sort of accident, or it happened, as it said in the statement, where he just fell ill, then I think it's exactly the kind of unexpected event the Kremlin will be dreading ahead of the presidential elections. They will want to make sure that everything passes off without a hitch, without any kind of surprises, because that's how you run a stage-managed election.
Okay, well, many thanks indeed for now, Will. This is the newsroom from the BBC World Service. I'm Nick Qureshi, 12 minutes past 2 GMT. Let's move on to some other news. Donald Trump's legal bills are adding up pretty quickly. Less than a month after the former US president was ordered to pay $83 million in a defamation case, a New York judge has ordered him to pay more than $350 million over fraud allegations. The former president, along with his two sons, Donald Jr. and Eric, had been found guilty of massively inflating the value of their properties to get more favourable bank loans. So, just what dents will this put in the finances of the Republican front-runner in the US election year? I put that to our correspondent in New York, Neda Tofik.
This is a huge financial blow to Donald Trump, $355 million, and that is far more than the cash he has on hand. And when you add to that the interest he will have to pay, the Attorney General's office said it amounts to $100 million in interest. So Donald Trump, before he can even appeal, will have to put that amount in full with the court. He could try to get a bond, but I think all of these are questions that people are going to be examining in the coming days. Will he be forced to sell assets, for example, to pay this fee? There were other parts of this verdict, though, that went better than expected for him. The Attorney General wanted him to be banned for life from doing business in the real estate industry in New York. The judge capped that at a 3-year ban. And this idea of the corporate death penalty, many were waiting to see if the judge's earlier ruling about his business license being canceled would impact his business. Well, the judge actually reversed his earlier decision. So instead, he's put in 2 tiers of oversight on the company. That means that any major business decisions will need their approval.
And of course, Ned, Donald Trump has come out fighting. Let's hear a little bit of what he's had to say.
It all comes out of Biden. It's a witch hunt against his political opponent, the likes of which our country has never seen before. You see it in third world countries, banana republics, but you don't see it here.
Always in a ebullient fighting mood, isn't he, Donald Trump?
Absolutely. I think he's become even more defiant and aggrieved by this entire case. I mean, we've seen him particularly here in New York throughout that 11-week trial, going out in front of the cameras, saying this was all election interference, a political witch hunt, without providing any evidence, just as he did there. One of the interesting parts of this verdict was the fact that the judge said none of the defendants showed any remorse and that the fraud was absolutely staggering.
Clear frontrunner, of course, for the Republican nomination for this year's presidential election. Is what's happened now going to have any repercussions on his election campaign?
So far, his legal troubles have only seemed to help him in terms of fundraising, in terms of going up in the polls. You know, I mentioned there his argument to his supporters that there was no victim in this case because the banks were paid. But what the judge ruled was that this was nevertheless fraud, that there was a need to protect the integrity of the marketplace. But that idea of there not being a victim has been quite convincing to his base, who have questioned why this case was even brought. And so perhaps this just helps him even more in fundraising. We'll have to see.
Let's repeat that. Next on the programme, Argentina's new libertarian president, Javier Milei, has defended his huge public spending cuts after annual inflation reached more than 250% this week, now the highest rate in the world. He said slashing government spending was the only way to tackle long-term inflation, but in the meantime it has led to soaring prices. Our South American correspondent, Ione Wells, has been talking to people affected by the president's policies.
When you look up at the grand architecture in central Buenos Aires, it's a reminder of how this was once a wealthy country, but down here on the streets with people shouting "Cambio, cambio," illegally trading dollars and pesos, is a reminder of how fragile the economy here now is.
At one supermarket, meat has gone up 30% in 2 months, a can of Coke by 50%.
People are very sad. I have 3 jobs and I can't make ends meet. I think about all the people who don't have anything. Many people on the street. That breaks my soul.
But some factors behind these latest price rises are deliberate.
El Estado no es la solución.
The state is not the answer, it is the problem, the new President Milei told the Davos Economic Forum.
Ministerio de Cultura, afuera.
He's slashed public spending, slashed the value of the currency, slashed subsidies for energy and transport.
Afuera.
After years of high public spending, he argued deep cuts are needed and that things must get worse in order to get better.
My refrigerator is literally empty.
Sylvia sews hair scrunchies to sell at a market for a living and says sales have gone down by 50%. She relies on state support and is fearful Milei's policies will make life harder.
People can't buy food. The policies they are carrying out will kill the people. Milei is crazy.
So just up the road from Sylvia's house, her sister Adriana runs a grocery shop. She did vote for President Milei. We're just going to talk to her now.
We live through inflation day by day, and no one gives us an answer. Today we have someone who tells it how it is. We will wait as long as we need to. We are already used to it.
We're just outside the Congress building in Buenos Aires. It's 10:30 p.m. and I'm with Axel, a 21-year-old from the group Jóvenes Libertarios. They go around the city at night putting up posters in support of his policies.
How would you describe Milei in one word?
Crazy. Most people call him that, but I think it's good crazy. Socialist or interventionist ideas were the norm. Well, Milei was crazy enough to defy all that.
His fans and critics both describe him as crazy, but disagree on whether he will rescue or ruin Argentina.
That's our South America correspondent, Ione Wells, and if you'd like to hear more about this, you can listen to the Global Story podcast wherever you get your BBC podcasts. Let's take you to Hungary next.
Ez a két hét rámutatott, hogy Magyarországot magára hagyta.
Friday saw the largest rally for years against the right-wing Hungarian government as tens of thousands of people marched through the streets of the capital, Budapest. The protest followed the resignation last week of both the country's president and the justice minister, two key female figures who had agreed a pardon for the deputy director of a children's home convicted of covering up sexual abuse by his boss. This demonstrator expressed his frustration.
I'm István. I'm here because this whole situation is very infuriating, and finally there's some sort of movement in here that's not political, so it's easy to to follow the law.
But the president did resign. That was a pretty big thing, wasn't it? Didn't you already succeed in? You've already got some change, maybe.
Well, in my opinion, it's not enough because she's clearly a puppet, and